But my guest this morning is a young man that I met some months ago, and we've become fast friends. We actually served together, and we're going to talk a little bit about that during the interview on the Universal Right Publications LLC Advisory Committee, their advisory board. We actually serve on that. And so we have had the opportunity to speak with our advisory board members from UWP, and Perry was one of our latest ones to join us. So he is my guest this morning. We put this together a couple months ago, so I am thrilled that we have kept the date and everything is where it's supposed to be and everyone is where they're supposed to be. But my guest this morning is Dr. Perry Daniel, and Dr. Perry Daniel is employed by Stride Learning, formerly K-12 Incorporated, as a vice president of portfolio management. He previously served the company as a senior director of school partnerships and compliance, deputy regional vice president of school services, and head of school of Louisiana Virtual Charter Academy. He represented Stride as an inaugural fellow in the CEO Action for Racial Equity Fellowship, and prior to joining Stride, he was employed as the principal of Prescott Middle School, where he was recognized as Principal of the Year by the Advanced Baton Rouge Charter School Association in 2010. Before moving to Baton Rouge, Dr. Daniel worked as the principal of Bethune Middle Academy in Shreveport, Louisiana. He earned the school turnaround specialist credentials from the University of Virginia for his work at Bethune. He received a Bachelor of Arts from Dillard University, a Master of Arts from Centenary College in Shreveport, and a Doctorate of Education from Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas in 2007. Dr. Daniel is a proud and active member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and he is married and the father of 4 children. He is a native of Griffin, Georgia, and presently resides in Prairieville, Louisiana. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Dr. Perry Daniel. Dr. Daniel, good morning.
Good morning, brother. How are you?
I am wonderful, man. As they say, all is well.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So, all right, man, welcome to the show. About a month ago, somewhere around that March 13th, 14th time, we're from somewhere around there, we had a chance to meet live down in that Washington, D.C. area, in the Maryland area. And we had a good time that evening as we went out to dinner, and we had a chance to discuss some UWP business, and we were with IO and just had a grand time. So now we're together here on the show. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you, we're going to go, I read your bio just now, and it intrigues me. I'm not surprised because I'm an African-American male as well in education, but I always like to help the listening audience know and to talk to folks, especially African-American males in education, kind of like what was the path and the journey to get there? Because this is the thing. There is a shortage of teachers, and then there really is a shortage of African-American male teachers, as well as African-American principals. So kind of what was your track? Where did we get started in terms of going down this road? Has education always been your thing, or was that a later in life career change, or what was going on there?
No, I think it's an interesting journey, but I always knew I wanted to go into the field of education. My mom even shared with me a couple of years ago, she was, just simply saying, everybody, doesn't get the opportunity to do what they want to do out of college. And I was fortunate enough to do that. I went to school to become an educator, had my bumps along the way with, telling a little bit about my age when we had to take the NTE exam. I had my bumps in undergrad when at that time at Dillard, you had to pass all 4 parts of the NTE to actually graduate.
Right.
And I had passed the first 3 parts, and it was my senior year, and it was strictly on me. I took the first 3 parts. When I got to my specialty area, I just couldn't focus. So failed it the first time, and I was like, look, I can't take this chance. I need to graduate. So my last semester, instead of student teaching, I ended up focusing strictly on history and took my 4 history courses and graduated with my degree in history because I was a secondary education social studies major. So I ended up getting my degree in history And soon after graduating, I just took the NTE again, and actually moved to Shreveport actually, and got hired as a special education teacher my first year, and the rest is, opportunities opened up by the end of my first year of teaching. The principal at the school where I was working said, "You know what? I think that he called me in right before spring break of my first year, and said, "Hey, I think we want to give you an opportunity to start learning some school administration duties." And it goes back to someone being a champion for you, always having a champion for you in your career. But he gave me an opportunity, so he took one of my class periods away, Mark, and allowed me to work in the office to learn the administrative duties. And I think that was the foundation for me saying, yeah, I do want to be a school leader. I do want to be in a position where I can make decisions that I think are best for children and teachers. So that is how my administrative, the seed was planted for me to go into administration. But I enjoyed my years. I taught for 5 years, and I enjoyed those years. I realized that I was there for a reason. So
it's interesting as I hear your response. There's a few things to unpack there and there's a lot of similarities between our stories. In terms of now you're having the mentor, as you just said, somebody being a champion for you. That is critical. That is key. I have a champion for me. I have 2 or 3 of them, and one in particular as to why I was in the principal seat. I am in the principal seat to this day, and I have no problem with sharing with folks. Had it not been for Joseph Fulmore, one of our fraternity brothers at the time when he was principal of the school and I was in his school, he had not received his doctorate as of yet. And since that time, he'd received his doctorate. So he's now Dr. Joseph F. Fulmore Sr. That is my mentor and my champion, because he did the same thing just like your principal did. Now, this is the interesting thing, Dr. Daniel, in terms of I was willing to take on the extra responsibilities on top of our teaching responsibilities. He said, look, I'm going to take away a period, and because for me, he didn't take away a period, but on my prep or either on my lunch, I was willing to do it. There are so many teachers, and I'm not bashing teachers at all, but there are so many teachers who, for whatever reason, either they're overwhelmed, which I do know, they will not take on the extra responsibilities during a lunch or a prep or take away a class or whatever to learn the extra skills to become an administrator. Now, administration is not for everyone. This I know. And as a matter of fact, it's interesting that last point you made about being able to lead a building. Whenever I was doing my master's in education, the dean, which is another one of my mentors, Dr. Michael Chiricello, I had told Michael, I had said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to leave the classroom. I'm not really interested in being the principal. I really love what I'm doing. I love the kids. I love teaching. And he told me, and I tell this story all the time to people, he said, well, I want you to look at it this way. As a classroom teacher, you can impact 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 students at a time. As a building leader, you get to impact an entire building. Now, once he said that, I was sold. That totally changed, gave me a paradigm shift when he says, there's a difference between leading 10, 15, 20 at a time versus impacting an entire building. So when I heard that last statement you made, that immediately came back to mind. Now, going back to why this discussion to me is critical. And yesterday in my school district, we just did an entire district-wide professional development for all teachers and for all principals on teaching Juneteenth. And the person that we had who was the facilitator was a local pastor that is also the chairman of the African American Studies at SUNY. And outstanding job in terms of sharing information about teaching Juneteenth. It's not just a day to celebrate. Where I'm going with this long detour here is the presence of African Americans and especially African American males in classrooms and in administrative positions in schools. I'm going to leap when I ask this question. When you were these various schools that I called off, what was the makeup of the population of students in terms of their racial backgrounds and ethnicities?
Okay, so let me add one thing to that. So the first school I went to as an assistant principal, when I was working in Shreveport, Louisiana, I taught for 5 years, but after those 5 years, I did 3 years as an assistant principal.
Right. And
in that role, I went to what would be considered a rural school. It was Bethune Middle School in northern Shreveport, North Shreveport. Some people may call it Blanchard, Louisiana, but North Shreveport. And it was about 70% white, about 65% white, 35% black. Okay. In that space, you served 5 trailer parks, 1 country club, and you had black students who did not, about 25% of the black students who lived there were bused in, who went to school there were bused in from a urban black community. So that was the first school, and that was the makeup there. And the unique thing about that, you only had 3 black staff members I'll say you had 3 certified black staff members out of about 35 teachers. And 2 of those were special ed. And the third was a female PE teacher and myself. So if you count me as a certified, so out of that staff, the kids that were there, they only saw 3 certified teachers at the black certified teachers, and 2 were women and 1 male who was in special education. And then you had the custodian, you had the security coordinator, and myself were the only black picked in, and particularly the males that they saw were myself, the custodian, the security coordinator, and 1 special education teacher. So that was a unique experience, and one of the things that my father-in-law told me in going into that environment, he was very clear on the fact that, hey, man, you got to treat people right, be respectful, because there will be days when one day they're going to call you because of the makeup and the area where we were working. He said, one day you may be Uncle Tom, one day somebody's going to call you the N-word, because of the makeup. He said, so you just do right by people, and that will guide you in that unique environment. And that's what I did, Mark. I just did right by people, and some of those people that I met, those relationships are still strong today.
And that's exactly where I'm going in terms of the representation, in terms of folks seeing folks who look like them in front of them, and folks who don't look like them in front of them. And your father-in-law was absolutely correct. When it comes to education, and one of the quotes that came up yesterday was, I'm trying to think, and I would have to go back and find it, but it was a powerful quote that I now have to tag, but it was, education is never neutral. You're either causing folks to become free or you're causing them to conform. And I am paraphrasing that. All right. You're either freeing people or you're conforming them to the system as is. All right. Mm-hmm. The fact that you now get in front of folks who look like you, who may have never ever, like you said the custodian, you said the this, you said the that, but very few teachers. They now see a male teacher in front of them. For those African American kids, whether you said anything or not, you have no idea what you've probably did for them in terms of seeing someone who looked like them in an authority position. And for our Caucasian kids, the same deal. Oh, whoa, wait a minute. Our instructor is African American. And your father-in-law was absolutely right. You could be called either or, this, that, and the other. But the bottom line is you were there. In 2022, as you know, just to get teachers, period, it's like right now we are in a desperate situation, especially after the pandemic, dealing with, COVID-19 just decimated education in terms of trying to hire. And then when you now lay on top of that, well, not only do I want a teacher, I want an African-American male teacher. So now you're really reaching. All right. So that's why I'm going down this track, because it is so important for someone like you and I and others to be in front of children regardless of the race and ethnicity, because folks need to understand that African Americans produce, perform, and are educated just as much, if not more, than anybody else. So, and you're absolutely right. The track that you talked about in terms of going from teacher to vice principal to principal, that's generally kind of how the ladder works. Generally, for those in education, you teach first, then you get your first supervisory or admin assignment, usually as vice principal. Now they created other positions like supervisors and things like that, or department chairs. You get that, then you get promoted to principal, and then you move from principal to assistant superintendent, from assistant superintendent. That's generally how it goes. Every now and again, somebody will jump the steps, but usually that's kind of the track up. So I'm really keying on the importance of folks being able to see someone that looks like you in this authority position in education, because what happens is you get kids that say, I want to be like, I'm sure when you're teaching, I don't know if you had your doctorate at that point or not, it was Mr. Daniel, or you had kids say, I want to be like Mr. Daniel.
It was Coach Daniel when I was in the classroom.
Even better. Even more impactful. Coach Daniel. So I want to be like Coach Daniel. All right. That even more impactful, the fact that you had coach in front of it, because if your kids was anything like my kids, they love their athletics. So now when you start talking coach, that's a whole different thing than Mr.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, you work your way through, and you decide now at some point to get your doctorate. And I'm going down this line, folks, because I see you're from Griffin, Georgia. I was just down in Georgia over the last couple of days. I was down in Atlanta.
I saw that at graduation.
Yeah, I had the graduation, and I went down. I picked up my mom down in Louisville, Georgia, and then took her to Atlanta. My daughter got her master's in cybersecurity and intelligence. So she has now. I have two masters, but she has one. Her mom has one. So she's matched me. So I said, I got to go ahead and get the doctorate now. So I got to go ahead and do the doctorate and go ahead and do it, because I got. She doesn't match me. I got to go ahead of her. But what drove you to get the doctorate? And again, how impactful that is as an African American male to now have doctor in front of your name, because even at my daughter's graduation, one of the deans of the college says across the country, only 14% of the population has a professional degree. In other words, once you start getting into masters and doctorates, it's only 14% of the population. And then when you start breaking that number down to folks who have doctorates, the percentage is small. And then when you break it down to African Americans who have doctorates, the percentage gets even smaller. What kind of drove you to go down the path of now receiving your doctorate, earning your doctorate?
Well, I actually had a friend who went and got his doctorate. I think you and I talked. He's a frat brother of yours. His name is Rich Milner. And
yes.
I had, so Rich and I grew up together, and, we kind of followed each other's paths as far as the work. We knew both of us wanted to go in education. He was wanted to go an English major, so he's a former English teacher, but he had gotten his doctorate, I think, in 2001. I think he earned his doctorate in 2001 from the Ohio State University, and I got a chance to go to his graduation, and I was like, okay, this is cool. This is, he kind of talked to me along the way about the work he was doing. I was like, yeah, this is right. This is good. Well, when I got back to work, I was more, I always been focused on the practice. Like, what is
right.
it? I want to live this. I want to be close to the people. I wasn't as focused on the research. So I never, because I knew if I really wanted to go and get the PhD, I was going to have to step away from my work.
Right.
If I really need to do it. So I had a colleague. She was a professor at LSU Shreveport, and she reached out to me and said, "Hey, they have a EDB program at Stephen F. Austin." I was like, "Okay." And she said it's a unique. They're doing a cohort model, and it starts in the summer, but you have to go on the weekends to during the school year. Okay, so I looked at the looked at the format of the program, did more research, and found out that there were two other people from the Shreveport area that were interested in this program. And the funny thing about it is that at Stephen F. Austin, they had never had any people from outside of Texas in their program.
Wow.
So the three of us we decided that we wanted to do this. So in 2003, we started the program, and it was, we started during the summer, and at the time
Correct.
I was serving as an assistant principal during summer school, and the principal who was over the summer school said, "Hey, go ahead and you can take off on Fridays. Just get someone, see if you can get another administrator who will cover you." So I found a gentleman who said, "Yeah, I work 1 day a week as a summer school assistant principal," and so I would leave on Fridays. The other two, my other two cohort mates, we would leave out Fridays and get there for around 1:00 on Fridays, and be in class from 1 to like 8, or 1 to 5, depending on what was the schedule. And it was a great experience. I was out of originally 19, but 16 of us stayed through. I was the only black in the cohort.
Not surprised.
And yeah, so that was and the program was focused on a term called the scholar practitioner leader. And with that thought was the thought of actually taking his knowledge and research and putting it into practice.
Right.
But it also had a social justice lens on it. We talked about critical theory and critical race theory at
Correct.
the time. It was what I needed to grow me, to stretch me from what I was doing as an assistant principal in a situation where my principal would not allow me to do anything with the academics or instruction. He kept me in that box of doing discipline,
Yep.
buses, and sports. He kept me in that box, so that helped shape me on how not to treat an assistant principal.
Now I'm gonna jump into you, and I want you to keep your thought of what you're saying. And I just wanted to pop in there at that point because, and again, for folks who are not in education, what Dr. Daniel just said happens more than not. That the assumption or the stereotype is, if you are an African American administrator, you're automatically assigned exactly what Dr. Daniel just said. You're assigned discipline. You might get athletics. You might get anything that's a part of the stereotype of African. You heard him say he would give me anything but academics. See, when I go down this line and start talking to people like this, they say, "Oh, you think too deep." No. It's not a matter of thinking too deep. It is by design, whether it's conscious or subconscious. That quote I was talking about is, "There's no such thing as neutral education. Education either functions as an instrument to bring about conformity or freedom." I'm going to say that again. There's no such thing as neutral education. Education either functions as an instrument to bring about conformity or freedom. And Dr. Daniel, I'm going to let you go back to what you were saying, but I wanted to jump in there because that happens. I had a situation that same way. It wasn't me, but I have one of my colleagues who is now a doctor. He went back and got his doctorate, but the same thing was happening to him. He was constantly getting assigned discipline and was constantly getting told his academic side was not strong enough.
Well, I'll tell you what ends up happening, or what ended up happening for me. I had, as a principal at that time at the middle school where I was, I learned a lot of what to do and what not to do. But I had an old school principal who was a former coach, and that's what he didn't learn until he became a principal. And for me, that was too late.
Correct.
So as I'm participating in the doctoral program, I'm doing more thinking about, if I'm in discipline, I got to find out why our discipline numbers are not where they need to be. So we talked about, so the first thing I did in that role after being going back to get enrolled in the doctoral program, I started doing data analysis on our referrals in the building, suspensions, and things of that nature to share with our teachers. And that was the first time that anyone had been able to present, or I had been given the opportunity to present to the teachers in a professional development type format.
Right.
So I did that from a standpoint of, hey, the teachers thought that all the number of referrals, our suspensions, and all those things were heavily impacted by the students who were bussed in, who were the black kids, and that was the perception.
Correct.
After digging into the data and being able to show them, like, no, those kids make up a small percentage of our population, and they make up an even smaller percentage of our referrals and suspensions. So we can't blame those kids. And at the time, I was at a space where I was trying to get teachers to own. Everybody owns whether students were leaving their class or not.
Correct.
So, and not that I'm not going to support you, but let's take some ownership of trying to be the first line of, I hate to even say defense, is offense, really,
right,
to build relationships so that students don't want to leave the classroom. What's going on in there? Are we not prepared? Are we not building a relationship? Are we not able to de-escalate situations? So that's what I kind of worked to with our staff on at the time, and that was my first opportunity to go into the academic space, because I talked about a well-prepared teacher is the first reason why students will not act up in class.
Correct.
They won't have time. They won't have time, and the activities that are going on will engage them enough so that they want to stay on track because they're engaged. So that was my first opportunity and first attempt to connect referrals and discipline and the culture to academics and instructional preparation.
You are absolutely 100% on point. And for those, for teachers that are struggling with classroom management, what Dr. Daniel just said, it has been my experience as well, that the teachers who are the most engaging, who is prepared, who has developed that relationship with their students, they don't have that many classroom management issues. Matter of fact, when I get an issue from that particular teacher, I know something is really wrong in comparison to a teacher that every time you turn around, they're calling down to the main office. That's when I was kind of, and I remember I was talking earlier about Joe Clark. You heard me talk about Joe Clark when I was playing You'll Never Walk Alone. But Joe Clark had this thing, look, I'm going to give you, I think it was 3. I think he gave the teacher 3 times. I'm going to give you 3. It might have been less than 3. But he's the first time all right as a student, second time maybe. But after that second time, something's wrong with you as the teacher. That was kind of his philosophy whenever he was dealing with classroom management issues. For those of you who've just joined me, my guest this morning is Dr. Perry Daniel. We are working our way through kind of like his career as an educator, particularly as an African-American male educator, and we're going to work our way all the way up to him becoming a member of the advisory board at Universal Right Publications, LLC. That's what we're working our way towards. So I'll tell you what, Dr. Daniel, I'm looking here again at your bio and the various schools you went in, or you've been in. At some point, you now you joined the charter school universe.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
I was had been a principal for 5 years, and I was in a transition space. Our district was making some changes, and I had a conversation with someone in the Baton Rouge area. And for those that don't know, Shreveport is northern Louisiana. It's really on the border of Texas and East Texas and Northwest Louisiana. And I had a conversation with someone in Baton Rouge about a school opening that was coming up. They had the district the state had done school takeover, and some charter management organizations had started up, and they were running a few schools. This Charter Management Advanced Baton Rouge Charter School Association was running, I think, 5 schools in Louisiana that they had since taken over as charter schools. And this Prescott Middle School had been under Advanced Baton Rouge Charter School Association. They were in their first year when I got the call to come down and think about serving as the leader for the second year in their under their Advanced Baton Rouge Charter School Association. So at that time, I had a conversation with someone in Baton Rouge, and Baton Rouge to Shreveport is about 3.5 hours. So had some conversations and realized that I could stay where I was and stay in a district and get moved to a role to be from a principal at a middle school to being an assistant principal at a high school. But I also knew that I thought I should have been moved as the principal, but that wasn't my decision. But they also told me I would be the only male administrator on the staff in an urban high school. So, Mark, similar to what we talked about earlier, I knew that if I went into that role and accepted that assistant principal role at the high school, that I would eventually be dealing with discipline. And that was not where I was in my career or in my mindset. I thought that I brought more to the table than dealing with only with discipline. So I made a decision to transition from working in a district in northern Louisiana to moving to Baton Rouge to become principal of a urban middle school that most would say was in the hood, that it had some challenges. Historically, it had challenges as a school to become their principal, and it was a challenge. It was challenge making a decision. It put a challenge on my family, but long term, it has worked out. I've been in Baton Rouge since 2009, in the Baton Rouge area since 2009, and my career is taken on many roles since then.
And for those of you, again, we're Dr. Daniel and I are having an opportunity to talk principal to principal. And then for those of you, I always bring this up because I got a kick out of it at the time. For those of you old enough to remember the O.J. Simpson case, when F. Lee Bailey was examining Mark Furman, Mark had been in the Marines and F. Lee Bailey had been in the Marines. And so when F. Lee Bailey came up to the witness stand, he said, "We're going to talk Marine to Marine." And so right now, Dr. Daniel and I, we're talking principal to principal. And the points that he's bringing out, now see, he's talking down in the South, and yet we've seen the same thing in the North in terms of roles, in terms of assignments, in terms of stereotypes. They do exist. Folks act as if what we're talking about does not exist, but the truth of the matter is it does. And it's even that much more important for students to be able to see folks who look like them in front of them. I'm going to share a very quick story. When I first got my vice principal assignment, when I was first moved or bumped up or promoted from teacher to vice principal, I actually went to a school within the city that was in more of what would be considered a suburb part of the city. They were very matter of fact, the school had never had an African-American administrator. They had not had an African-American principal or an African-American vice principal. One day, a young lady who was African-American came up to me on the playground, and she said, "Mr. Medley, I owe you an apology." And I looked at the young lady and I said, "Why?" And she says, "I automatically assumed, I had no idea you were the vice principal. I just automatically said you were the security guard. I thought you were the big black security guard." And we had a laugh about it, but that was saying something, that where folks' perceptions of our roles are. They're not expecting to see African-American principals. They're not expecting to see African-Americans with doctorates. They're not expecting. So that's why it's that much more critical that we do be in those places. They're not expecting us to be doing academics. They're expecting us to be doing discipline. So we have to continue to break these barriers, or as that quote says, we need to continue using education for freedom, not for conformity. So let's talk a little bit about Stride Learning. You said it was formerly called K-12 Inc. How did all that come about?
Well, when I was in the role as the principal of the middle school in Baton Rouge, I had started to build some relationships with other educators in the charter school world as well as in the local district. And I had after doing 2 years as the principal of the charter school here in Baton Rouge, I realized we had some change in leadership in the charter management organization, and I realized that the person who was leading it didn't need the job as much as I needed mine. And I'll say very clearly what it was. We had a conversation, and she said, you know, if things don't go well for me, I'm gonna go back to the house, because she had come out of retirement to lead this charter management organization. I said, well, if that's your philosophy, this is not. We're on two separate pages, because I can't go back to the house. If I don't have this job, the worlds of 3 or 4 people are going to change. And so, to me, it said, your job doesn't mean as much as to you as my job means to me. And at the time, I didn't have anything set up on an entrepreneurial effort that I could have stood on. So when she gave me that piece, it let me know that we were not moving in the same direction. And so I took a role for right at about 9 months with another charter school. It was called at the time Mentorship Academy here in Baton Rouge, and it was a unique charter school. It's only been open a couple of years, but it was focused, if you're familiar with the concept that was established out in San Diego called High Tech High. And
yes.
So the gentleman who one of the founders of the school, had been a teacher at High Tech High in San Diego. So he started to bring that concept to Baton Rouge. So I worked with him for a few months. And while we were at a basketball game one evening, one of the gentlemen I had met a few years earlier, who was leading another charter management organization, small, predominantly black organization. And he said, hey, man, I think I got a job for you that you might, I think I got something for you that you might like. And he said, let's go have, when you get a chance, let's go have dinner. And I knew him as well as the gentleman he was the CEO, and I knew the gentleman who was the chief academic officer. And so got a chance to talk to both of them about the virtual school. They had just opened a virtual school. It was in their first year of operation. And he said, hey, we don't have a head of school. I think you might be a good fit for it. And that's how it started. So that was in December of 2011. I did not start until May 1st of 2012. So I just celebrated 10 years within the Stride or K-12 family.
I know, that's right. Well, I'll tell you what, for those of us, or for those listening who may not know what Stride is, what is that? What do you all do? Okay.
So Stride, and it says formerly known as K-12 Incorporated, we're the leader in virtual education. So been around for over 20 years now, providing virtual either curriculum or establishing virtual schools around the country and offering that online curriculum for students throughout the world. Actually, there have some partnerships with some international spaces also, where we provide coursework or classes for students. But Stride focuses on really it's I'm gonna say individualized, but in a sense it is a lot of flexibility. Depending on the school and depending on the state requirements. But we provide both public schools, private schools, and now virtual faith-based schools around the U.S. in about 37 or 38 states, serving almost 200,000 students. I think right around 185,000 students right now. Around the world.
So you all were doing this prior to the pandemic?
Yes, this has been since I want to say 2000.
So the reason I asked, because I didn't know anything about virtual, doing things virtually in terms of education up until we had to start doing it because of COVID. So you all were already doing that. You already had virtual classrooms or online classrooms or what have you. So was there an uptick, or was there an increase in folks seeking out your services when COVID came through?
Yeah, Mark, prior to COVID, I think we were at probably 100,000 students. And post-COVID now, like I said, we're 185. I think we got up to close to 200,000 students in the height of COVID.
Right. So you almost doubled. You almost doubled what you were doing during COVID.
Yeah, almost double. And then, but keep in mind that we maintained most of those students. Like I said, we're 185,000, serving 185,000 students.
Right.
So it's virtual, and I think everybody, like you said, prior to COVID happening, there were some people that wouldn't even talk to us.
Right.
When we talked about virtual education. Oh, everybody had their own opinions of it.
Right.
But post-COVID, and now let's say during COVID, we were trying to offer services to people for free because we knew that districts were struggling with teachers being prepared to work in this space.
Correct.
So K-12 at the time was offering free professional development, working with building. Also, there were some contracts that we had with districts to help prepare their staff.
No, and see, when we cut over to that, when we had to abruptly transition from going school live in person to it took a minute to get going there to get, like you said, teachers, because there's a lot of things folks take for granted, but it's a totally different style of teaching in front of a computer, just like it's a totally different style of learning in front of a computer than it is if you're standing in front of the classroom. So when you hear Dr. Daniel talking about his company was willing to professionally develop these teachers for free, that's big.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Mark, one of the things that we realized and people realized, the difference between K-12 or Stride it was K-12, and I'll get to the name change in just a second. But the reason K-12 was, we didn't miss a beat during COVID.
Right.
We were, and the reason being is because we were not reacting to
Correct.
the pandemic. This is what we do. And so we were being proactive in trying to help others. Well, our work didn't change. The only change for us was when the children of our teachers were home with them. Right.
That's right. Because see, that was a whole different dynamic too. Now you had teachers home with their children. That's exactly right. That's another dynamic that was in there. So, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. So that was the only shift for our teachers, for our staff, is now, like everyone else in the world, even though our structure didn't change as much, we had to allow for some flexibility so our staff could know that they have to work with their own children.
Right.
And also in those situations where our students had siblings who were going to a brick and mortar school, now they're at home with them. So people were, you had extra kids in the house, and for our virtual students as well, where they had siblings who were going out to brick and mortar school. So we had to be flexible in that regard. But
correct.
We had to tweak that piece, but for the most part, we were able to continue teaching.
Wow. To me, just listening to it and knowing what the company is, you guys were ahead of the game. Like you said, whenever COVID hit, that was not new for you all. Now, for us, that was totally new. Going virtual, for me, totally new. It really was. So I tell you what, now I'm going to work my way, because if you've noticed, I've kind of worked my way through, and now we're at the point of, where did you connect or hook up with Universal Right Publications, LLC? Because I know how I connected. I had known Io for years. I knew Io before she was named Io. I knew Io when Io was Denise. This is going because Io was one of my first guests on this show 20-some years ago, back in 2001, 2002, in that area, because this show started in 2001. And Io was one of my first guests at the time with her novels that she was writing. And we've known each other and been wonderful friends ever since. And so I know how I became associated with Universal Right. How did you become associated with Universal Right?
So in my work at Stride, I was always looking for opportunities to build relationships. So in my work at Stride, I was representing Stride as a member of the corporate roundtable for the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, and I've done that for the past 4 or 5 years. And in December of 2021, we had the National Black Caucus of State Legislators annual legislative conference was held in Atlanta, and at that time, that is where I met Ayo. And we were talking about her work and just kind of learning a few things. And I think I put my name in the hat for a raffle for UWP while she was one of the vendors there. And we just connected, and I saw a couple of books. I was actually, prior to coming to Atlanta during that time, I had spoken to a pastor friend of mine who was interested in starting like a summer program with a Afrocentric curriculum. So when I got there and I saw some of the publications from UWP, I shot him a picture of it and I said, look, I'm going to have to order this book. So talked to Ayo about ordering a couple of books, ordered the book, put my name in the thing or in the raffle, and just told her, look, she was looking for board members. And originally, what's funny, I gave her someone else's name, Mark, that I thought would be good. I'm serious. I did. I gave her.
I'm sure.
And the more we talked, she was like, "Why did you give me someone else's name when you fit the bill?" And I said, "Well, I didn't think I fit the bill, originally."
Right.
And the more we talked, I was like, "Yeah, I can do that, and I can do that. Yeah, that fits." And she was like, "Well, why don't you do it?" And that's pretty much how it came to be. But that it was really her, and then her doing her due diligence on looking at what I had done and what I do. And that was it.
I was laughing because when you were sharing, I was laughing because that is so her. And by the way, she is doctor as well. As you heard me talk earlier about my principal and fraternity brother, Joseph Fulmore, he was not doctor at the time, but he went on and got his doctorate. It was the same with Ayo. I knew Ayo, again, whenever she was Denise, and I've seen her transform and transition over the years, but she ultimately went and received and earned her doctorate. So she actually is Dr. Ayo Sakai, and she is the CEO. And again, Universal Right was around when I first met her. She had just launched that or just started that company, LLC, during that time frame. Whenever she was writing her first books and novels, Universal Right, it was just kind of there. And it has bloomed and blossomed and flourished and grown to the point now where it is a major force. So she is the CEO and the publisher of the publishing company of UWP LLC. It has an executive board. It has an advisory committee. It has an editorial committee. It is a force because it is now partnered with Sage Publications. Sage Publishing has partnered with them, and they are, like I said, a force in terms of particularly those who are publishing works for education at the college level. So Dr. Ayo Sakai has been on the show multiple times over the years, but very quickly, Dr. Ayo Sakai is the CEO and publisher of Universal Right Publications, LLC. Since founding UWP in 2004, Sakai has prioritized publishing academic titles that demonstrate a commitment to African agency through scholar activism, women-centered initiatives, and Black academic excellence. As a social scientist and author, she understands the unique challenges of the academy and the social global implications of being a Black immigrant from the global South. Again, like I said, this UWP was actually formed in the early years of our friendship. of Io and I knowing each other. I remember when she formed UWP. So to see it go from its infancy to where it is now is something. I'm very proud of my wonderful friend, very proud of her and where WP is going. Like I said, it has an executive board. Io, or Dr. Sakai, is the CEO. We have Molefe Kete Asante, Dr. Asante. He's been on the show as well. He's the department chair, professor of Africology at Temple University. Gianni DeLima, she's with SAGE. She's the SAGE representative and the partner between SAGE and UWP. Ian Clark, he hasn't been on with me yet, but we're going to have to get him on there. And then, as I said, we have an advisory committee. Angelica Bean, Dr. Bean, another PhD, and both Dr. Bean and Dr. Sakati both went to HBCU, Howard University. So she's Angelica, or Dr. Bean, is on the advisory board. Cheyenne Rozier, I've known Cheyenne since Cheyenne was a little girl, and now she's be heading to get her doctorate at some point. She just graduated not long ago from out in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and now she's going to be going to New York, NYU, or one of the schools in New York. I forget which one, but I know she's coming back up this way. She's going to be working on her doctorate because, that's why I said, she's going to match her mom. So, like I said, my daughter just matched me. I got to go ahead. That's why I think I'm going to go ahead and start my doctorate at some point as well. But Cheyenne is on the advisory committee. I'm on there as well as Dr. Daniel. And they have an editorial committee. Reynaldo Anderson, Dr. Anderson, he's been on the show. Reynaldo is on. We also have Malana Karanga, PhD. Dr. Karanga is the founder of Kwanzaa. So he is the founder of what we celebrate or acknowledge starting the day after Christmas, which is Kwanzaa. That's our principles. So he's on the editorial committee. And then Yashitaka Mike, also doctor, founder of Asian Centricity out of the University of Hawaii. Yashitaka, I had to look at that to make sure I'm saying it right. Yashitaka Mike. Dr. Mike. So there's some serious folks that's involved with UWP, and I'm just honored and proud to be with such folks. Again, and Dr. Daniel being one of them. And we've had, and I've got to see if I can get the last few members, regardless of what board or committee that they sit on, to get on here as well. But I asked Dr. Daniel that just to kind of see, okay, what was your road to UWP? How'd you get there? And so I started laughing whenever you said it, because that sounds like Dr. Io. Whenever you said, why don't you do it?
Yeah. and that's how it works. That's how it works, and I'm glad because it exposed me to some things, but also I'm big on establishing quality relationships, and I think that when you establish a quality relationship, it is not something that you take lightly, but you foster it over time. And it may not be a situation where you talk to the person every day,
right?
But when you have opportunities to strengthen that relationship, you do that. And so I thought that my relationships could add value to UWP.
You're absolutely correct.
That will over time.
No, trust me, it will. Like I said, to be a part of such an august group of people, I mean, I just gave you the lineup. I mean, and I've had the opportunity throughout to meet most of these folks, not all of them. So I'm going to have to get with her to hook me up with Dr. Karanga. But most of the folks on the panel, I've had an opportunity to speak with in one form or another, whether, we've met or whether we've been in our meetings or either coming on the show. So it is just, like you just said, that networking, that building of relationships, man, you cannot beat that, because none of us never know when we're going to need the other. None of us, as a matter of fact, at this point, when I think I have to have 3 letters of recommendation. I already know 2 of them, and I hadn't thought of the third, but I said, you know what, I can get Io to write it. I'll get Dr. Sakai. She can write my 3rd letter. She don't even know this yet, but if she's listening, but she could write my 3rd letter of recommendation when, as I'm applying for the doctoral program. Because I already got 2, Dr. Fulmore and Dr. Chiricello, and if I get Dr. Sakai, that'll be my 3 letters of recommendation. My point is, you never know, once you've forged these relationships, where each of us can help each other. I mean, you're in schools and doing your job. I'm the principal of a school. You never know where we may wind up connecting and helping each other out. So you cannot beat networking and relations. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I find that to in education and in any and all walks of life. I think that I live by this principle of I'll be respectfully relentless and relentlessly respectful.
I know that's right.
I'm focused on what I want to do. So I'm going to be relentless in trying to do it, but ultimately being just extremely respectful of others and realizing that is in some case the basis of other than trust is respect is the basis of a good solid relationship.
Absolutely. And for those of you, if you want to check out more what we're talking about, when you keep hearing us say UWP, the U, W, and P stands for Universal Right Publications, LLC. You can go to the website, uwpbooks.com. Real simple. The letter U, the letter W, the letter P, all connected, and the word books, uwpbooks.com. And that'll take you to the site. I've even seen the website, the changes that it's made as it's continued to grow and become more sophisticated. Even, since we've been affiliated over the last few years in terms of, the building of that and how it keeps changing. The fact that we have, if you want to go see the advisory board, if you go into the tab about UWP and you can go down and you'll actually see the various boards and committees, and you can click on each of our bios. You can click on our picture, click on our bios to learn more about each of us. It's there. It's a very sophisticated website. Again, uwpbooks.com. So this is what I do, Dr. Daniel. The last couple of minutes of the interview, I give you an opportunity to promote. Now, I don't know if, as we've talked about Stride, whether that was part of the promotion or what, but any works that you're doing, any book signings, any other work, if you want to talk about Stride again, anything that you want to promote, the only thing you can't do at this point is say a dollar amount or a price, but anything short of that, you want to shout out family members, you want to shout out anybody, you want to shout anything you want to do for the next couple of minutes. I'm going to turn the mic off and it's yours, and then we're going to be out.
I'll say a couple of things. Yes, I am employed by Stride as Vice President of Portfolio Management. I'm serving in that role, we're starting virtual faith-based private schools. So that's my daily work. I enjoy networking and trying to continue to make strides. The mainstream, the name that you think of when you think of online education. I would encourage you to take a look at what Stride offers. We offer a variety of programs. So that is my work. I also have the Daniel Education Group, which is a consultancy working with school leaders, chartered management organizations, and those people that are interested in growing the field of education and growing, particularly focused on improving staff culture and staff practices to help improve the academic performance and then learning environments for students. So that is what I do along with some of my colleagues with the Daniel Education Group, which is so important to me and the legacy I leave for my children. But also just the value of strengthening a network and realizing that as a man, particularly a black man that has a variety of experiences, mostly in education, but also getting the corporate America experience, I value the idea of how, let's say this, I think highly of what we can place on our relationships and understanding that our net worth is our net worth.
Right.
And so as an employee of Stride, as the founder of Daniel Education Group, LLC, it's all about the relationships, man. And how you make those work for you. So I would just, in closing, thank you, Brother Medley, for allowing me to come on your show this morning. But that's where I am right now, and I think I have to close with, you know, a few years ago I really started to dive into what was my why. When I participated in the CEO Aspirational Equity Fellowship, one of the things that we started with was, what is your why? And so being able to develop and articulate my why, it came to putting it on paper and being able to speak to it and share it with people. My why is simple: is I want to make the world a better place for the people that I love. And so with that in mind, that drives and determines how I live and interact with other people, because I want to put good vibes out into the world and positive energy, because I never know when it's going to come back and impact the people that I love. So I don't want to put any negative energy out there. I don't want to put any bad vibes out into the world, because I don't want it to come back to the people that I love. So that drives me, and that's who I am.
I know that's right, but I tell you, my brother, I'm so glad you were, because see, again, Dr. Daniel is an hour behind me. So whatever time it is here, so now it's 8 o'clock here, it's 7 o'clock there. When we started the interview, it was 7 o'clock here, and it was 6 o'clock there. But we had an educational talk. And for those of you who are not in education, we've provided just minuscule insights as to kind of how the bureaucracy and politics in education happens. It's behind the scenes, but because you send your child every day to us for 6 to 8 hours, and as they say, in locus parentis, we become their parents. But there's a whole lot that goes on in education, like anything else, that goes on behind the scenes to make things happen. So some of the things that we talked about this morning, working our way all the way up to how Dr. Daniel and I met through UWP, through Dr. Io Sakai. We worked our way all the way up to that, and that's what we've been chatting about this morning, and I am grateful and thankful for that. So I tell you what, man, you have a great rest of the day, weekend. We will be in touch as I record these. It'll be on my YouTube archives, and I will send the links to you, and you can share them however, which way you'd like. Once you get them, they will be yours.
Yeah, brother, thank you for the opportunity. Keep doing the good work. Keep doing the good work.
And I'm going to say the same back to you. All right, man. Take care. We'll be in touch.
All right, brother. Take care.
Take care.